I'm Richard Pyatt. Welcome back to another in our episodes from the city of Battle Creek, the BC City Connection podcast. You may be listening to us by way of the city website where you happened upon those episodes. You may be watching us on Access Vision. Either way, welcome to the program. Spend time chatting with folks from City Hall who are helping us and working in the city of Battle Creek. Today, here as we talk close to the end of 2024, we're joined by the interim city manager, Ted Deering, and Mayor Mark Benke to look back, of course, on some of the things, the accomplishments of the year, but also looking forward to what's coming in 2025. Welcome to you both.
Welcome. Thank you for hosting us.
Yeah, great to be here.
Well, thank you. So if we look back at 2024, Ted, we would say there are several things of note, not the least of which is a leadership transition at City Hall, obviously. Rebecca Fleury has moved on from City Hall, and we'll be talking about the leadership transition coming in 2025. But if we look beyond that to some of the other things, boy, is the Doubletree Hotel at the top of that list?
Yeah, I don't know if it needs to be at the top of the list, but it certainly needs to be within the first two. I mean, and I'm sure the mayor would concur with me on this statement that the reality is the hotel is the economic engine in the downtown. We felt it when it was closed, and we're feeling it now that it's reopened. And there's a lot of enthusiasm and excitement around, this facility. It is absolutely beautiful. It's a public-private partnership with a lot of local investment that shows, how committed our institutions and stakeholders are in this community to Battle Creek, and it's a great first impression for our community. I mean, I've got a story already. I'm just talking to a developer who was looking at 3 different communities, and he came into Battle Creek to get an impression of the community, and he stayed at the Doubletree, and he just felt like, man, this is fantastic. Look at this place, and started doing his due diligence. Battle Creek went right to the top of his list.
Wow. So other cities with landmark hotels like this were not making as much of an impression to him.
Yeah, they had three communities on their list that they were looking at, and when they came into Battle Creek, and that was their first impression. Now, obviously, there was more that occurred during their visit that and convinced them that Battle Creek was the place to be, but that hotel made a great first impression, and that's obviously exactly what we want in our community.
Yeah, it might be interesting for a resident, for example, who lives here and maybe passes by it on a frequent basis, but maybe they stop into the restaurant from time to time, but they don't stay there, and maybe they don't understand the notion of the landmark and as you say, the responsibility that building has representing the city. This really is that important, you're saying?
Yeah, it absolutely is, and again, it's the way that we draw individuals into our community who have an interest in investing, and it's the way we recirculate tourism dollars in our community, and it's the way that we capture and retain wealth. So it's at the forefront of our economic development strategy, and luckily now we've got this beautiful facility that's open and functional, and we're seeing the fruits of our labor.
Mayor Benke, obviously you were there on the day of the big ribbon cutting, and there were a fair amount of folks who turned out because they were curious. So this is the other side maybe of the residential perspective, right? They wanted to come and see what the rooms looked like and the banquet facility and that sort of thing, didn't they?
I was shocked, Richard, at the number of people, especially the elder citizens of Battle Creek. A lot of the really stakeholders that have really watched Battle Creek transform through the years. I was really surprised at the number of people there. And yes, just like Ted said, it's the heart of our city. And I commend everyone that got involved, from Joe Soborowski, who walked through the building after he acquired it in almost a bankruptcy sale, when they were finalizing a lawsuit between the previous owner and the city of Battle Creek. And, his dream really became reality. It took a number of years, but I just want to say thank you. And Ted worked hard too on the transition. So we need to support it. I don't think there's a better general manager that we could have found to do the work that needs to be done there. So I look forward to the reality that it's going to be successful. I know my wife and I have been up to 50 Beacon, and it's not cheap, but we had a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's a certainly a great looking place too. So what's next on the list, Ted? So we had this big hotel unveiling in 24. What's the next thing that rises to that level?
Yeah, and I think when you're talking our economic development strategy here in the city of Battle Creek, it really does focus on housing as a priority. We need multiple housing typologies at every price point, really in every corner of the community. We spent most of 2024 working on a very comprehensive needs assessment of our housing opportunities in Battle Creek, and the numbers were revealing. I mean, we've got deficits both in single family housing and all kinds of multifamily typologies that we need to address. And land use and regulatory issues come into play, as well as the need for gap financing. So I think a lot of what we're going to talk about, spend our time working on, is the implementation of the recommendations from the housing needs assessment and just trying to get more units online.
Some people might say, why is this suddenly such an issue? Was there a catalyst that helped us recognize this need?
Yeah, and I don't know that I would say it was suddenly an issue. I mean, it feels like it is, right? And certainly the pandemic kind of exacerbated things. It's shown a pretty bright spotlight on housing needs in our community. But it's something that's been building over years. We've got a fairly homogeneous stock here in Battle Creek. People like a lot of different typologies these days. People like to rent, people like to own, people like to live in multifamily or dense urban in settings. And so you need a variety of different housing types. And I think that, with us, a lack of investment over time, it's been 20 years since we had a LIHTC development here in Battle Creek. The lack of investment over time has caught up with us, and now we need to react.
So there's been an assessment of the need, and do we fully know that now, the results of that?
We do. That study is complete. It is on the city's website, but I would suggest that the best way to learn about it is that our planning and our community development divisions of community services are starting a planning process to update the city's consolidated plan and the city's master plan with a housing component. And so there are going to be lots of opportunities over the next several months to engage with our staff to talk about housing, to learn what's in the needs assessment, to see what the recommendations are, and to plot a course for going forward.
Mark, I imagine what you hear as mayor is we need more affordable housing. That's just a guess on my part. Is that what you hear most?
Yes. And I think that Ted has listened to that initiative from a lot of the neighborhoods that are close to where the developments will take place. And that's why he's working with developers. And it's not an easy task. And I think Ted's done a great job at better understanding how we achieve success when it comes to a lot of these homes. So it's going to take some time, but I see a light at the end of the tunnel. I really do, especially across from the Federal Center. I think Bronson Hospital Systems has been very helpful in redeveloping the building that they abandoned at the corner of Emmett Street and Washington. So, but Ted's really worked it well, and I'm been very impressed with that.
You see the light at the end of the tunnel also, Ted?
Well, what I do see, right, is a lot of developer interest in our community. We went decades without seeing developers show a lot of interest in housing developments in Battle Creek, but now I talk to a different developer just about every other week who, is either breaking into the West Michigan market or has specifically targeted Battle Creek for future development. And I think, because of some of the development that's going on around us and some of what, some momentum that we've been able to generate on our own with projects like the hotel and the Milton, we've got folks that are now interested in Battle Creek.
All right. Maybe one of the other things from 2024 that stands out are the fire facilities and a plan to try and address all of that. True?
Yeah, very true. I'll defer to the mayor.
Absolutely. I think it's historic. I'll go that far. We have some fire stations that are over 100 years old that really haven't adapted with the times and some of the things that we need to do to put at ease the firefighters and some of their responsibilities. And I think if there's anything our former city manager did, and before she left, was get this passed. And, we gave a thumbs up from the city commission perspective. And I think we need to continue doing what we need to do to provide the best facilities that we can in the city of Battle Creek. And Ted's going to watch that implementation. And I hope that he's here when we finalize it. So it's going to be a good one.
So we have a direction, Ted, on this, and we're going to move forward with it.
Yeah, absolutely. There was a lot of community engagement that took place over the course of 2024 to get a feel for, what we needed to do as a community around fire facilities. The plan is to address all 6 of our stations. There is a recommendation in there to close one of the stations, which helps with deployment. But the reality is they all need some attention. And I think the strategy of trying to address them all in some way, shape, or form at the same time is going to produce the best results in terms of coverage for the city and safety for our firefighters.
One of the other things in 2024 that brought some excitement was the notion of the river restoration in downtown. This is exciting.
This is exciting. We got through a very important first step in 2024. We got the U.S. Army Corps to acknowledge feasibility, which was not something that we've been able to do over the course of the last 10 or 15 years. But finally, we're in a position to own enough land around the footprint of the river for the Army Corps to say, yes, it is feasible that you could naturalize. That doesn't mean we have a design yet, because we don't. I know people are really anxious to see a design, but we do know that it's feasible, and that's allowing us to move on to the next steps.
So we might run out and get our kayaks at some point relatively soon, maybe.
Yeah. Define what you mean by relatively soon. I mean, the reality is, and I know the mayor knows this as well as I do too, that, we're going to have to engage the federal government on this project, and that's going to take time. So no, this is not something that's going to happen overnight. It took us a little over 2.5 years just to get through the feasibility analysis. So we're trying to be realistic about it, but we don't want to dampen the enthusiasm around the initiative, because I think everybody would love to see naturalization of that concrete channel.
All right. Well, there's certainly other things in 24 that are notable, right? The Hollander Blue Light development, Beckley Road corridor. In fact, I think our last interview with Rebecca had some focus on that. The Kellogg Renaissance Zone, the Airport Centennial. So it was a busy year. Let's look forward now in 2025. And of course, the leadership transition to which we referred a few minutes ago. Mayor, how are we going to find a new city manager?
I don't think it's going to be that difficult. It's not like the city attorney hiring of the new city attorney. I think there'll be some people that are going to be pretty interested in leading our community. I predict that we could have at least a dozen people apply for the job. I think Rebecca set the standard, and she has a nice style. She has a good grasp of government. She knows where we needed to go as a community. And if you look at some of those things that she stood up for, women-owned businesses, minority-owned businesses, economic development, she assigned Ted right away to that task along with the housing situation. She built good relationships, and especially with our nonprofits. I don't think we've ever had the relationship that we've experienced with our nonprofits throughout Battle Creek. And that consequently helped to the realization of the hotel. I mean, without the help of the nonprofits, that hotel would not be open today. So I think it's going to be hard, but at the same time, the city commission wants to take their time in doing it, and I think that's great. And we're going to roll up our sleeves right after the first year and get working hard.
So we need a relationship builder.
Correct.
Yeah. So the process will be similar, I would imagine, to many like this, maybe even the city attorney type search. You're going to undertake a process as city commissioners to identify the candidates and probably bring in a firm to help do that. Is that true?
Absolutely. And I will say that this one, there has been a number of notable people that have asked that they participate. And sometimes the commission gets a little frustrated that other people want to get involved. But I really feel that a group of maybe a dozen people that would assist the city commission in making the right determination be involved. I'm going to have to convince that commission of that, though. I think that's unique, but at the same time, I think some of the contributions that have been made during the last 4 or 5 years, people want to realize that we're doing the right thing and moving Battle Creek forward. I have no problem with that. I think it shows transparency, it shows involvement, and it shows a better Battle Creek at the long run.
Is it too aggressive of a deadline to presume that by spring we'd have a choice?
I'd add midsummer, maybe by
Okay.
4th of July. But you never know, it could go quickly. And sometimes the finalists you'll see who it is. But we want to be transparent, we want to be open, and we want to be as inclusive as possible.
Ted, you travel in these circles. Does the momentum that the hotel brings and some of the other things that we've talked about stir up interest, would you say, in folks like yourself who are interested in positions like this?
Yeah, I would say absolutely. I think Battle Creek has built some momentum after the last 10 years. And to Mark, as Mark indicated, much to the credit of Rebecca Fleury, our former city manager, to the point where this is an attractive job. Financially, the city is very solid, which is going to appeal to a lot of candidates. We've got stable government here, which is going to appeal to candidates. There's momentum in the downtown, which is going to be attractive. And it's just, it's all around a nice size community that's very manageable. So I think you're going to not only see folks that would like to step up to the next level, but you're also going to see folks who are currently working in other communities who would be thrilled to make a move to the city of Battle Creek.
Well, that sounds encouraging for all of us at this point. And maybe interestingly timed is master plan and consolidated plan updates, which I suppose if a candidate really wanted to know where our heads are at, as they say, this might be a good way to find out, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Probably two of our most critical planning documents at the city of Battle Creek, right? Our master land use policy, and then what we're doing with the consolidated plan, which guides our federal funding, our spending of community block grant dollars, homes dollars, those kinds of things. So two very important plans that dictate how we serve the community. And we're going to have a public process over the next several months to look at both of those documents. I hope folks will get involved. But if you're a candidate looking at Battle Creek, pay attention to that process, and you can learn a lot about our community.
When we talk about consolidated plan and master plan and the involvement of the community, what do you want to hear from them?
Well, the consolidated plan really dictates how we address low mod income needs in Battle Creek. So it's very important for us to understand what folks are looking for in their neighborhoods. And I think the mayor would concur with me there that we have a neighborhood feedback infrastructure in place in the city of Battle Creek, and those voices are important to helping us determine how to best spend the resources that we have. With the master plan, the focus really is going to be on a housing component, and we're going to try to educate folks about what we learned from the housing needs assessment, and then talk specifically about because we know we need to develop at higher densities in our community, and we need to talk specifically about higher density typologies in our residential districts. And that's a tough conversation to have in the neighborhoods because folks get used to things being a certain way, and we need to do things a little bit different to meet our housing needs. So I think it'll be an interesting conversation. Ideally, we can come out of it with a unified vision between residents and City Hall with regards to what the future of our community should look like.
Mark, do commissioners have residents come up to them and say, I want to be a part of that master plan discussion? Or is it more of a situation in which they come to you with a concern and you say, you really ought to be a part of the master plan talks?
Well, very good point. Just this past weekend, I was down on Calhoun Street, and a resident came up to me and said, Mark, I cannot put any more car washes on Columbia Avenue or cannabis stores. And that is what the master plan dictates to the city commission and the planning commission is how we plan and how we implement uh, businesses in our community. And I think that people have spoken when it comes to cannabis, and they would like us to curtail the number of shops that are set up in the community. And I think the same thing with car washes. I know the owner that one of the car washes on Beckley stops me all the time and just says, "Hey, we've had enough car washes." So, you know, if that's what you're saying, yes, it's a little confusing for some people, but I think it's important that we do it, and that's why I think Ted's spoken very highly of it too.
Yeah, well, understand the position of the fellow with the car wash. He's got plenty of competition. And the cannabis industry might be slightly right sizing its own industry just because it's
Well, I
been so
think it's
saturated.
beyond there. I talked to one of the owners of a cannabis farm out in Bedford, and he said that they're getting almost out of the business. They just can't make any money in it. It's
Wow.
unbelievable right now. I think it's at the lowest price ever. So
Wow.
it'll be interesting to see what happens.
It was legalized and everybody got excited and got into the business. Now maybe the pendulum comes back a little bit. You know, interestingly that we're talking about car washes and things on Beckley because there is a mall development focus as part of a plan. Is that right, Ted?
Yeah, I think we have seen a renewal of interest in that site. I mean, obviously that's an ideal site. It's right at the junction of I-194 and I-94. It couldn't be a better site for regional development, but it's been stagnant for a while. I think the transition from Horrocks, although as difficult as it was to see them leave the downtown, what they have created in terms of a vibe out at the mall has been very important to what you're seeing happen now, which is other outlet developments like Olive Garden, Texas Roadhouse, Jimmy John's, and others, as well as our Beckley Road planning process, which is also re-envisioning what the mall could look like going forward. So there's some momentum there and some real enthusiasm about what that site could become in the future. And that's great too, because obviously, we are not sitting around waiting for the return of, bricks and mortar retail.
Yeah, it requires some out of box thinking, doesn't it?
It does. Yep.
What are some of the examples you've heard? I think probably municipalities everywhere would be interested to hear these ideas because a lot of municipalities are trying to figure out what to do with these developments.
Yeah. And you've seen different things work in different communities. You've seen a lot of non-traditional office use. Converting retail space to non-traditional office uses has been big. Housing is big. Can you imagine if there was a component of, say, for example, senior housing there, and you could just walk down through the mall, get your exercise, go to Horrocks, get your groceries, hit one of the restaurants, come back. We've talked about regreening some of that space to create a little bit more of a parks feel there, which I think is a strategy. And, a hotel's not off the table either. I think that would be an ideal location for another hotel development. So there are a lot of things that are being considered. I think all of them have some potential, but it'll take some investment.
What do you hear, Mark, as you talk to people? Do they say things to you about what they want to see at the mall?
Well, they're just thankful that Ted delivered the Olive Garden. I got to be honest with you, because that if that question had been asked over 100 times, it certainly everyone's waiting for that. But I really see the Beckley Road corridor as being a focus. We may not get into it till 26, but there are some things that Ted had been working hard on out there that I think are important. And I know the community's gotten involved with a lot of the questionnaires and some of the meetings that we had publicly. So I watched that. And I think BW3's redid the interior of their facility just recently. I think that's a signal that things are turning there and there might be more opportunities for other stores to become involved. So
Hmm.
that's from the
Don't
mayor's
discount the
perspective.
retail.
Right.
Yeah, yeah. So this is the key, Ted. A mix of local and national chains. Is that how you see this?
I think so. And I think a mix of uses too. some uses that have not been traditional to that area. I mean, that's a heavily zoned business district out there that needs to become more of a mixed use environment. So if you could think of housing sprinkled in and throughout all of the development that you see out there, we don't need less commercial space. About the right amount of commercial space exists out there. We just need to create some more density so that it can thrive, right? And so I think, the long-term strategy is going to be mixed use, higher density development, including residential, and then, walkability and quality of life.
All right. We can't go before we talk about the Kingman building renovations. What a nice opportunity.
Yeah, we're excited about that. I mean, we were very fortunate to work with our elected representatives in Lansing to land a grant to help renovate that building. I mean, that building is such a classic, and so many of us have history with that building and fond memories. We'd like to get it back into working condition, as it were, so that we can plot the future of how it might be used. Right now, we just need to address some critical maintenance issues, and we've got some funding to do that. So we're excited about the renovations that'll happen in 2025.
Probably warms a mayor's heart, a mayor who's been around for a while in that position, to see this happen.
Well, it certainly doesn't take away from what a lot of the people in the neighborhoods, especially the north side of Battle Creek, that is, I've yet to run into anyone that doesn't talk about their time in either an elementary or even a middle school where they visited Kingman Museum. And I'm not sure where we're going with that, but I think the work that State Representative Jim Haadsma provided certainly was a catalyst to complete some of this work. It won't do everything like Ted mentioned, but it's certainly going to secure the building and make sure that we got it open so that when someone does want to come in there and develop it, we're going to be able to do it.
All right. Before we go, Ted, if we zoom out a little bit and just say, looking at 2025, are there other things, generally speaking, that you'd like to see focused on?
Yeah, again, BCU has a new strategic plan in place that provides a guide for what we're thinking economically as a community. I'd like to see us, we do, the mayor indicated it from the very beginning. We have to focus on housing in 2025. We have to be in a position to absorb the development that's going to occur here. But job creation and continuing to, attract development into Battle Creek is certainly going to be a high priority. And I think we got to be realistic about the fact that you're going to have a transition in leadership at City Hall too. So making that happen successfully will also contribute to a key 2025 objective.
We've talked about the connections between philanthropy and public and private partnerships and all of these things. We also have quite a military presence here. Is that a connection that the city interacts with a lot, or does the military just keep, I was tempted to say soldiering on, but you know what I mean?
Yeah, the mayor and I have been very fortunate to participate on a quarterly basis. Actually, I think we may be doing it biannually, sitting down with every one of the military installations in our community. It's been organized by Battle Creek Unlimited, something relatively new. And I don't know about you, Mayor, but I have been amazed at the things that I have heard at those meetings, including the level of investment that is occurring at a number of the facilities, whether it's the Army Guard, the Navy Reserve, it's the Air Guard base. I mean, there's a lot of investment occurring, which shows a commitment, obviously, to Battle Creek, and we certainly want to be able to reciprocate that. So I think the military presence here is it's as bright as ever, and I think the future bodes well for our working relationship with our military installations and their commitment and future in Battle Creek.
Mayor, you have thoughts on that?
Yeah, I too just want to say that it provides an opportunity for them to talk about some of their commitments to our community. And a lot of people didn't realize that Marine Corps were building a new facility out in Springfield, just next to the city of Battle Creek, but it kind of gives us the information and the large amount of monies that are being spent. And I think you see everyone shows up at the meeting biannually, and I think it's good. And I think our lobbyists in Washington, D.C. is also very appreciative of what we're doing. And then he can go back to D.C. and troubleshoot and see what we can do to correct some of the problems that we have.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, here we are looking on the precipice of 2025. We appreciate the perspective that you both have. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Interim City Manager Ted Deering and Mayor Mark Benke on the BC City Connection podcast. Take care.